Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Team Secret, and I've got a video for you all today recapping my weekend at the Richmond sector qualifier. So I was on Qi'ra. I've got a couple cards here featured on the first slide that we'll get into in a bit. And just start off by saying that this was an absolute blast. The most fun probably I've had at any event. You know, it was very exciting going in. This is right after Denver. This is right after the suspensions. So there was a lot of, anticipation. People were trying new decks. People were, very interested, I think. And the turnout was great. The event was great. A lot of really good energy. Met a lot of really cool people. And yeah, my teammates kept teasing me because in between rounds I was just like really excited to talk about the games. But yeah, I think a lot of other people similarly had a really, really good time. So that was very, very positive for the meta game, the health of the game. Qi'ra performed pretty well into a very wide field. This was the first multi-day event that I participated in, and yeah, she's like a pretty good like spread deck usually into a bunch of different opponents, and I think in this environment, that works pretty decently for her. I was the only energy conversion lab list on day 2, so that was pretty cool. We'll get into the other list in a little bit. I placed 16th, so very exciting. Even more exciting, two of our teammates also placed in the top 16, and they got their day 1 Galactic Championship buys. So congrats to Michael and Josh. Really awesome weekend for the whole team, and one of our main goals was trying to get as many buys for people on the team as possible. So let's jump into the list. So, for anyone that's played Qi'ra before or seen, maybe some of Wu's videos, like you're probably familiar with a lot of these cards, but I can get into some of the specifics, especially because it seems like the Data Vault version of Qi'ra is a lot more popular lately. So a lot of people were asking me, like, well, why are you still playing ECL and kind of what are the differences? So we can just look at some of the card choices here. So I guess first maybe we could look at a couple of some of the newer cards, right? So the first one we've got there up on the top right is Eager Escort Fighter, or Space Open Fire as it's sometimes referred to. Basically, one of the things that I thought about with testing was especially going into this event, there's a lot of good units in this set, and most of them are in space, right? So typically, Qi'ra has been a very ground-based deck. Not a lot of space units, partially because there's not a lot of good space units in these colors at all. And I felt like I needed to shade towards space just a little bit, try to have a little bit more of a balanced deck. So I, popped one of these guys in here, and in testing, against aggro or a lot of decks, it's nice just to, just trades with their unit, which is pretty good. In this deck specifically, because you're kind of a little more mid-range and you've got a lot of units, there were a lot of cases where I could just stick it and Overwhelming Barrage for 6 and go 6 to base, then 4 and 4, and it like won a couple games here and there. So just having another unit that also functions as removal is kind of cool for this ECL list, I think. The other card here that I got a lot of questions about is Fett's Fire Spray. So, why is this in this deck? This is kind of doesn't look like it would be in like a blue-green villain deck. It's basically here just as another ECL target for space specifically, and we can get into that a little bit later, deeper on the ECL targets. But the sweet spot is somewhere between like 6 and 9 ECL units, and so I trimmed 1 ground ECL unit for 1 space unit. And this card was great all day, and we can get into some of the details on that. What else do we have? So not necessarily a new card from this set, but Qi'ra was from Twilight. I hadn't really played with him much before, but the idea I think was you can ECL him into a 3-power unit, and then they can't target down right away. And against Quinlan, for testing against Quinlan, it was pretty good. Throughout the day, at Richmond, he was pretty decent. He had some good plays. He's got nice stats. You can also just like play him sometimes on a later turn, and he's pretty decent. And then the No Glory Only results. This is a card that when I first kind of got spoiled, I was not very excited about it because I wasn't really playing Vanquish previously, so I wasn't like really jazzed to play Vanquish in any of my decks. But there are a lot of use cases for it. I've actually been very impressed by this card. Compared to Fell the Dragon, which I'm still running one of in this list. It does something similar, but there's a lot of really interesting use cases that it creates a lot of value actually. So that's actually been very handy. It comes into play like with obviously Chewie's the big one, right? But there's a ton of other uses like Ruthless Raider has been like a nightmare card for this deck typically, so helps there. You could like take somebody's Yoda, Obi-Wan. You can take somebody's Super Laser Technician, which is really nasty. But it's just kind of like another tool in the toolbox, I guess. And I've been very happy with that card. So let's see, what else is kind of maybe not what I've used to been running. The Traitorous, I think. I've been toying with Traitorous like every now and then, but I just always kind of felt like it wasn't like super necessary or that exciting. But I think in this meta, there's a lot of pilots. People are going tall, right? There's a lot of space aggro decks, and there's also Chewbacca, which we talked about a little bit earlier. It's just kind of another out to some of these strategies. It's also pretty good against like Anakin, Luke, some of their units that you can just steal. Let's see. So one of the last minute changes I made before going down to Richmond was originally this build had 2 Super Laser Blast in it. Super Laser Blast is a just really good card in these colors to kind of help you reset the board if you get behind, whereas there's not really a card that can do that super well. And so I kind of felt like, all right, wide field, lots of different decks, don't really know what to expect. Super Laser Blast could be pretty handy here. And so I was, pretty committed to running 2. And then I just kind of thought about it and realized, there's certain situations where it's not very good. Some of these aggro decks are so fast. Like even the new Quinlan versions that like my teammates are running are just like crazy fast, and you don't even get a chance like Super Laser Blast really. If your opponent U-wings into Chewbacca and something else, you can't Super Laser Blast. It's really awkward. So I decided to trim 1 Super Laser Blast for a second Devastator, which kind of felt like a throwback almost to like set 2, where we're just running like all the Star Destroyers. But there's a lot of use cases like that Devastator is very good, specifically against like Han or any space aggro decks, right? It's just really good for kind of ending the game, closing the door, being a huge sentinel. It helps you kind of stabilize both arenas, which is like really cool. Like very few cards can do that and develop the board. So I did that. I was a little hesitant. I was like, is this making my top end too bloated? But it actually was like an all-star all day. So, Devastator kind of creeped back into the picture in set 3 when Han Green specifically, was really good. And so I was on like one last set, and in a space heavy set, I think having 2 in this list does actually make a lot of sense, and it performed really well. And there was no point where I was like, oh my gosh, I need the second Super Laser Blast. 1 Super Laser Blast performed great all day, won a bunch of games, and the second Devastator also won a bunch of games. Other than that, this is a pretty standard energy conversion lab list, and again, we'll get into the energy conversion lab unit specifically a little bit later. You just got kind of some top end here, Vader, Maul, Walker, Avenger, pretty standard stuff. And then obviously you have ramp, and then just some little guys. We've got a couple pieces of spot removal, and mostly focused on like the mid game. All right, so Why Energy Conversion Lab? This is a question I got asked a ton in Richmond, mostly because the Qi'ra Data Vault version is much more popular now. And yeah, so my first response is just it's fun. That's not very like complicated, but it really is just fun for me. I really like the play style of the deck, using ECL to kind of like catch back up or you know create some kind of interesting play maybe your opponent's not expecting, or try to contest the board in a different way is just a lot of fun. You can kind of fight a little bit earlier uh, with Energy Conversion Lab. I kind of have that here. So basically, being able to fight early is like, it's not just like, it's a function of Energy for Conversion Lab. It's like, changes kind of the makeup of the deck, right? It changes you from being, or changes the deck from being kind of more like, well, I'm just going to sit back and, fire off removal spells to like, well, I'm going to try to, defeat your unit and develop a unit, right? And there's also all sorts of cool stuff that you can do with, some of the individual units for all their different use cases. So it's just kind of fun to like try to fight for the board like with units. It's a very flexible mid-range deck, and you can also push damage, right? Like there were times where, I Energy Conversion Lab the Lom Pike out, and he did 16 damage to base, right? Like because sometimes they just don't have an answer to your unit right then, or they can't remove it, in a very efficient manner, and that unit just sticks around, and then you can still keep playing stuff for the next rounds. More units, because we're playing, these kind of 4 and 5 cost units. More of these units means that we've got better situations for overwhelming barrage, right? So really common problem in Qi'ra is, you love to just ramp, deploy Qi'ra, overwhelming barrage, right? Well, there's lots of situations where your opponent's ready for that and can immediately take her out, right? And in that situation, if you have overwhelming barrage in your hand, it's like extremely awkward, right? So being able to stick multiple units means that it's very, very difficult for your opponent to like remove all of them in the early stages of the game, right? So we will have one overwhelming barrage target pretty much at any point. I also like Energy Conversion Lab in the mirror. This is something I got asked about a lot during Richmond. And, Data Vault is definitely a nice get for the, what was previously the 30 health version of Qi'ra. But I've played, quite a lot of Qi'ra mirrors over the last year. And, in ECL versus the 30 health, I still kind of prefer ECL. I think it gives you like a little bit more options, I guess. Okay, so let's talk about the ECL units, right? Because this is kind of like what makes this deck, right? There are other decks that can run villain top end, right? All the top end is the same. I mean, there's some like, tiny variations, but, it's all Vaders and Mauls and Star Destroyers and whatever, right? So there's nothing really like spicy there. But this is kind of like, the identity of the deck, right? So, we're playing Energy Conversion Lab. We need to run units that work well with Energy Conversion Lab, right? So, Lom Pike. Lom Pike is probably the most fun card in this deck, right? He's got great stats, right? He's got Smuggle situationally. It's really his on-attack ability, though, that is like very, very, very good. There's just a lot of situations where, he can protect himself from being target-towned. If your opponent has like a tiny space unit that you're not going to deal with right now anyway, and you can deal with it maybe in a couple turns or a couple rounds, you can give the shield to that, and then it's not really that relevant. And if he survives, he can keep doing this. And there's just so many play lines in this deck that where he can generate a ton of value and just become a real headache for your opponent. Just super good card in this deck. That's why I roll on 3 of him. The other really, really nice thing about him too is if we miss ramp for whatever reason, especially in a matchup like Sabine or Quinlan, right, where like they're a faster deck, we have an Energy Conversion Lab unit on round 3 that's not conditional on ramp, which is absolutely huge. So for the second card here, we've got Qi'ra. He is basically like the 5 cost. So you'll notice that there are 2 4 costs and 2 5 costs for ground and space, and we'll get into that in a second. But so he's basically the 5 cost ground ECL unit. In the past, this has been Gideon Hask, and Gideon is still really good. I was expecting a lot of Tarkentown and Quinlan, so that's why I opted for Key. He's very good. I mean, when I played him in Richmond, he felt good. He definitely generated a decent amount of value. Stats are nice. There were maybe a couple games I played him from hand later with no energy conversion lab, and it was fine. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with him. So if we go to space, it's sort of like the reverse, right? So on the ground, we've got 3 Long Pike, 1 Key. In space, we've got 3 Devastating Gunship, 1 Fire Spray. So a Devastating Gunship. So Devastating Gunship without ECL is like a pretty decent card, especially in Qi'ra, right? It's just got good stats. It has a 1 plate ability. It's got grit. You know, there's a lot to like here. But with Energy Conversion Lab, it kind of like pushes it over the top, in my opinion. Because what you can do is Energy Conversion Lab, you can ambush for 3 and then resolve the 1 plate ability. So you can effectively deal like 5 damage to something. Or you can ambush, defeat something with 3 or less health, and then defeat something else with 2 or less health. That could be in space, that could be on the ground, and you can see like how this combos really well with Qi'ra's deploy, right? She deploys, damages a bunch of things, and everything's injured, and this can take something out. Or you can play this just from hand without Energy Conversion Lab, deploy Qi'ra, and then it puts damage on it. It's got grit. It gets boosted up. Very, very good. This card is just an absolute all-star. Playing multiple in a game also feels pretty good. You know, you Energy Conversion Lab 1, kill 1 or 2 things. You have a big unit left over, and then you can often play the second one from hand after they deal with the first one to help stabilize the space arena. Maybe pick off like an L3 in the ground arena, something like that. Just really, really fantastic card. One of the best cards in the deck for sure. Now we go to Fire Spray, which is this card probably got me the most like confused looks in Richmond when I played this. Basically, in these colors, like we mentioned before, there's just not a lot of good early space units, early to mid-game space units. Fire Spray is a 4/4 for 4. That's basically why it's in the deck. You can Energy Conversion Lab, and it can pick off a lot of the early game space units and survive, which is really all that we care about, right? The goal is to Energy Conversion Lab, ambush something, take something out, and leave a unit behind, even if it's injured. That's okay. There's a couple like additional things with Fet's Fire Spray that's kind of nice. Like number 1, having 4 power, aside from the ambush, which is great. We can Overwhelming Barrage off this for 6. So it kind of lines up with all these other units. Just being in space is kind of cool. It gives you another option potentially for different lines. Also, this on attack trigger is really nice because in a lot of sequences with Qi'ra, you are like trading in units or defeating their units or whatever. There's like not a lot of units on the board. So you can like potentially defeat their unit and then effectively attack for 5, right? Or if you barrage off of it, you're attacking and they have no board left over, you're attacking for 7, which is just, it's a lot of damage. This thing performed really, really well in Richmond. Even though it's basically just like a 4th copy, quote unquote, you don't need to ramp with it, similar to Lompike. You can choose yourself to deal the 1 indirect to defeat your Super Laser Technician, to ramp on curve, and not spend an action to attack with him. It's just really, really, really good unit. Very happy running it as a 1-of. And the other reason we run it is because this gives us an even split. So we've got 3 Lompike, 1 Qi'ra and the ground, and then 3 Devastating Gunship and 1 Fet's Fire Spray in space. And I feel like in this meta where we have like, a lot of really good jump to light speed cards, and some of these leaders are popping up, like jump to light speed Vader, the pilot leader, had a really good showing in Richmond. I played against a Kaz Blue in round 8 of Swiss, I think. So we see these pilot leaders and some more aggro space decks popping up. So I really like having the even split, whereas like before jump to light speed, we would have maybe 5 in the ground and 3 in space. The 4-4 split felt really good. Okay, and then I just wanted to touch quickly on some questions we got in our Discord when I mentioned I was making this video, and hey, do you guys want me to answer anything? Okay, so the most common one was why not Data Vault? Data Vault, I think there were 5 Qi'ras in the top 16 on day 2 of Richmond, and 4 of them were Data Vault, I believe. I was the only Energy Conversion Lab. So Data Vault's becoming super popular. This doesn't necessarily surprise me. I feel like going back to set 3, Qi'ra 30 health base was more popular than Energy Conversion Lab, right? So this is kind of more in that vein, right? The 3 extra health is nice. There's enough cards in these colors now for like the top end especially that you don't feel like the deck is as inconsistent. There's enough cards that you're pretty happy running. As it's been discussed in other videos and things, that the main thing that feels bad is you reduce your chances to ramp and play Overwhelming Barrage, which are like 2 of the strong pieces of this deck. But other than that, you get more health, and there's a lot to like about it. You get the 3 Super Laser Blasts. You get a little bit more. You can grind a little better. So I think if you like that style of deck, that's great. I think Data Vault's obviously positioned really well. This is just like for me. I've played actually in a PQ with Qi'ra 30 last set, and I just did not like it that much. It's I don't know. It doesn't fit my playstyle, I guess. I think that it's fun and like a lot of the cards are very similar. I just because Energy Conversion Lab exists, like this version is more fun for me. If ECL didn't exist, I would probably be playing Data Vault. I'll just put it that way. Hard control plan for this deck. Basically, in the sideboard, we've got 2 Relentless and 2 Palpatine's Return, right? So those are the main cards. It's specifically revolving around Relentless, right? So Hard Control is playing mostly events. The game plan is, you really want to stick a Relentless. You want to present threats, deal damage, kind of make them react to what you're doing, and then try to sneak in a Relentless. It's very hard for them to deal with Relentless. You can often push a lot of damage just with the Relentless. The fact that they have to spend, 2 events, that's a lot of actions in a turn just to deal with 1 unit. And then you have Palpatine's Return to just bring it back, right? You can put a shield on it. You can barrage off of it. It's very hard for them to deal with. So yeah, it's kind of like a lot more involved than that, but that's sort of like the gist of it that I can squeeze into this video. What's the sideboard plan into the meta? So I don't know if I really changed the sideboard that much, to be honest with you. It was really just the Devastator that we talked about. The sideboard for this deck is already kind of like split. It's like, you have a few cards for aggro, and then most of your cards are for top end, like, fighting like bigger mid-range decks or control decks. So really it was just swapping the Super Laser Blast for the Devastator for me. Like I said, more space units, more pilot leaders. Devastator is just really good in the space arena. How to have a good flip round. This is another one that's tough to answer in a short period of time here, but basically I think you have to think about what your opponent is going to do to answer your flip, right? So if your opponent's playing red aggression, for example, like you have to think about, well, are they going to open fire Qi'ra? And if they do, what is kind of my plan B, right? So having a plan A, having a plan B, having maybe multiple options in your hand, also kind of like presenting the flip, but like not actually flipping, right? Maybe you can action churn potentially and see what they do and try to flip after they do something that round so they have no ready resources to deal with her. So I think it really depends on the matchup, but just trying to think about like, what happens if I deploy her and she gets dealt with immediately? Like, do I have a plan B, or should I maybe hold off until I can protect her or do something else? Tips for the mirror. So I mean, you know, ramp and play more big things, I guess. But no, but I think aside from those, I think being able to get chip damage in is really important. You don't want to like be at the mercy of potentially getting like milled out or something, right? Or just chain super laser blasted. So I think getting damage in, even though it sounds like maybe counterintuitive, you're like, well, it's a mid-range battle or mid-range risk control or whatever, depending on the configuration of the deck. Don't I need to be like outvaluing them? And I think you do need to outvalue them, but you really want to like be able to end the game and not prolong the game too long. In case they draw more big stuff than you. Every mirror is kind of very draw dependent, so just bearing that in mind. Top 5 cards Qi'ra doesn't want to see. Number one has got to be Ruthless Raider. That card is just, very annoying and hard to deal with. Probably Chewbacca, I guess. What else? Maybe For a Cause I Believe In. Just, burn out of hand is really, really strong against Qi'ra. What else do I not want to see? A ton of discard is like annoying. I don't know if it's that strong against Qi'ra, but it can be sort of obnoxious to play against. What else? Maybe like Sham Syndulla. That card's really, really good. I ran into that a couple times in Richmond. So yeah, I think those are my top 5. Cuts to convert data vault to ECL. I would say right now, I think Wu just put a video out on this, so if you're interested in Data Vault, he spent a lot more time on that than I have. I would just recommend going and checking out that video and his channel. But, to answer this in like 30 seconds, I would say basically, you need to, number one, get the ECL units in, right? And then trimming like a little bit of the top end and some of the redundant units that we stuff into Data Vault to get to 60. What changes should I make to this deck? I was really happy with it. I don't think there are a ton of changes that I would make or consider. One thing that I was looking at was maybe the 5-cost ground unit ECL slot. There's several options there. Qi'ra was pretty solid, but it could maybe be time to try something else there. Other than that, I don't really know if there's any changes I would make, but I'm sure that will change over the next couple weeks or a few weeks leading up to Minneapolis, which I'm going to. So I'll definitely be testing with teammates and friends and stuff, and yeah, see what happens. Suggestions against Quinlan Tarkentown. I think most important thing is holding an inexpensive card for Force Throw, right? So your Hylabon Enforcer, your Pike Sentinel, things like that. So you don't just get wrecked by Force Throw. Post board, bringing in Palpatine's Return, right? Palpatine's Return is so good in this matchup. If you get to ramp and then they play like Ahsoka, let's say, you Palpatine's Return, that Vader you just discarded. That's like a crazy tempo play. So I think just definitely keeping some Palpatine's returns in board, bringing them in, and then trying not to get blown up by Force Throw. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Our social links are in the video description. And thanks for tuning in. Take care.